Maybe it doesn't know what buff means. Yep, okay, so it just didn't know what the word buff meant, but then it... Today we're going to be taking a look at what is possibly one of the quickest offline image generation models currently available, and that is the newly released FLUX.2 Klein from Black Forest Labs. Now, in specific for today's video, we're going to be focused on the 4 billion parameter variant only. There was a 9 billion parameter variant released as well. However, the license in it is far more restrictive than this Apache 2.0 license that the 4 billion parameter model is covered with. So for that reason, we're going to stick to covering this. In some preliminary testing and seeing feedback of folks who have used this as well, there does seem to be a bit of odd behavior, at least in terms of like fingers and things that perhaps one may have thought we had passed on that hump. But the good side of this is that, as we see right here, it can be used in as little as 13 gigs of video RAM. They tout that it is extremely fast at image generation. Something that I find to be very significantly cooler than that is the fact that this is a model that can both generate images and edit images from within the same model. So I have a vibe-coded web interface right here, thanks to our friend Claude, and we can see that within the same model running, we're able to do not only text to image, but also image editing with an uploaded photo. So we'll be testing both of those today, and I am happy to report that I have not played with this too much. That's not what I was happy to report about. I'm happy to report that it is really rather quick, and this will definitely be a cool option for folks looking for high-speed photo or image editing or generation. Now, alongside the 4 billion parameter model, which we have open right here, as I mentioned, there was a 9 billion parameter model as well. However, both of those also had the base models released as well. The 4 billion parameter of which is also Apache 2.0, and the base model for the 9 billion parameter one is under the Flux non-commercial license or something like that. So we're basically just going to be focused on the 4 billion parameter model today. I'm not going to do anything with the base model, but chances are if you know specifically what this is, you understand, oh, that's cool that this is released. Now, something I'm seeing thrown around a lot here is this sub-second inference, which is essentially that it can generate an image in less than a second. For today's test, I'm going to be running this on an NVIDIA 5090 mobile GPU, so a laptop GPU, and we can see that Claude did also go ahead and kind of glaze this model by putting that into this little vibe-coded UI. It's not running that quickly on this machine, and even when I put everything on the graphics card and do not use the CPU offload suggestion that they have right here in this code snippet, it still is not that fast. I think the quickest I saw in just playing with it a little was around 3 to 4 seconds for an image generation at 1024 by 1024, which still is not bad at all. And with that, if you want to support the channel, feel free to subscribe, or for less than 10 cents a day, you can join as a channel member, and feel free to book a consultation to implement AI into your business at bjambone.com. Now, for our first run, I'm going to keep NVTop open right here, so this will show us specifically how much video RAM is being utilized throughout the duration of each component of this generation, and in addition to that, I will just keep the server and backend terminal window open as well, just so anyone interested in that stuff can see that simultaneously as we generate something, and now you very likely are familiar with what comes next. Now, I am putting that in quotes as I'd seen that as a suggestion just in some image model cards, and we can see right here VRAM is around, I saw 9.2, now around 10, and it should tell us in the bottom right corner here, generated in 10.93 seconds. So that is with the offload enabled, and we'll be able to speed that up later at the expense of using more VRAM. Now we can see our image right here. Not bad, and again, one of the big considerations here is that was very quick comparatively to things like GLM image, which I tested the other day on the DGX Spark, which has lower memory bandwidth in the system, but still, this is so much faster than most other image generation models that it really adds in an element of usability. And we can see that, sadly, I mean, the text isn't very good. Okay, I didn't even notice. The ARM situation here is, I won't say not good, I'll say disturbing, as the arm is seemingly coming out of the chest of this individual, our agent here, and there is also, so yeah, there's definitely some funky stuff going on here, but additionally, something I always like to do in the beginning of these is give it a lackluster prompt like this, and then a far more enhanced prompt with the same subject matter, just to compare how much the prompt intricacy makes a difference on the generated result. So I've now given a far more intricate prompt here for essentially the same subject matter, which is the Agent Poopman movie poster. And we should see as well, this will probably take around 10 seconds, but I'm more interested in seeing a side-by-side comparison of the overall generated result quality. And we can see that it is significantly better and did adhere to this prompt. But mostly what I'm focused on right here is that there is no extra third arm on this agent, and the text is more or less fairly legible. The only oddity is the W going, oh no, never mind. Right as I said that, FLUX.2. But you can see it's significantly better than the original one. And if we kind of just ignore the text, the actual graphical elements and such of this are not bad at all. It did properly adhere to the prompt as I sent it. I'm so used to these generations taking a while that I'm almost like having to adapt to such rapid fire image generation. I'm going to keep the prompts that I generate up here in the top right corner for anyone interested to be able to read them verbosely, but our next prompt that we're going to test is just a static screenshot from Runescape 2007. This is something that has definite varying levels of success, and really what that would come down to is kind of the model's training data as well, in terms of if it's seen this. This is this is not RuneScape looking, obviously, but it is somewhat, it has captured the essence of what I suppose could be expected. It almost does look a little more like RuneScape 1 style. So there's some decent pixel artness to this, I suppose could be said. That could also just be kind of like the quality degradation as you zoom in, but it is just generating in 1024 by 1024. And at least the individual on the left here does seemingly have a somewhat defined face, not so much the individual on the right, but perhaps that is because of the battle they're engaged in. Next up is going to be the retro LAN party as taken in 1998. This is one of my favorites. I suppose I'm nostalgic for something that I probably didn't ever really actually experience, being that I was 4 years old then. Okay, this is not bad at all. I'm going to download this, and I'll do this for all of them, and just we'll take a peek at them in a more expand window. This is actually significantly better than what I had anticipated getting, and the main reason I say that is because both of these monitors actually have a somewhat legible, in terms of what you can see visually, game on them. Beyond that, it's actually what looks to be the same game. So a LAN party would generally mean that folks are playing engaged in the same game against one another, and this definitely adheres to the style of what a LAN party would be. This is actually one of the few examples I've seen in which the screens show something proper, and beyond that, multiple screens actually show what looks to be the same game, which is how it would be in reality. So this is impressive. The flash photography aspect of this prompt is also properly reflected by the reflection of the light. No pun intended, but really you can almost kind of see the way the glass from a CRT would be reflecting from flash photography, as well as just the brighter areas being in the front, and then as the light kind of diffuses as it gets out, stretched out more, everything in the background is more dark. There's also another bright monitor back here, lots of beige. There are pizza boxes, cans. So far, I would have to say this is definitely our best result, and we've only tested a few things. So it is perhaps possible that text is kind of a weak point for this, but maybe images without text like this are far better suited for this model. Next up, we're going to try what is essentially supposed to be a retro gaming PC setup from the year 1925. So it's supposed to be a gigantic computer and other items that look like they would be from a photo taken in that time. Okay, this is again not too bad, and you can see the prompt up here while the image is generating, but overall this kind of looks relatively acceptable comparatively to what we would expect. So we have our smoke, and it does have the sepia tone, or don't quote me on the pronunciation of that term, but you likely know what I mean. Now, something interesting I noticed here is the prompt had told it to make it look like this is a genuine retro photograph find, and if we look and zoom in on the corners down here, we can see some form of aging that one would actually see in a real-life old photo of something like this, so that's just interesting. There's also what appears to be some form of creasing in the photograph in the top right corner along the edges as well, which is good to see, just some attention to detail in terms of adherence to the prompt. The gentleman is sitting in a leather chair in what looks to be a study. There is lots of smoke coming out of this retro gaming PC, and this does look almost steampunk inspired if you're into that sort of stuff. Personally, I'm not. But there's a mirror, or what is I supposedly think maybe the monitor, and some reflection. So overall, again, I think one of the more impressive portions of this is just the way that it kind of emulated the aged photography look in the corners of this photo. I've now gone ahead and changed the aspect ratio because we're going to be generating another movie poster, this time one that is somewhat silly, but perhaps a bit more realistic than the Asian Poop Man one, so it'll be interesting to see how it adheres to this prompt. Creepy. Okay, now again, something I noticed here that we did see in our first test, another phantom arm, which is disturbing, but then again, the entire theme of this movie poster is also disturbing. This individual's, or both of these seem to be some form of nightmare experiment. Here's what we're going to do. Let's try some image editing now, and we will have to scroll down here to do that, and we'll drop in some images. So if you're familiar with my image testing videos, thank you, and also you are familiar with this photo of myself with this Honda Beat. So I want to try something simple, at least to start out. So let's have it change the color of the car to blue, and we'll see how well I can go ahead and do that. Something I'm interested in seeing is VRAM utilization as well during, and I will read out because you may not be able to see it because of where I put my head in the videos, the duration it takes to actually make this edit and regenerate it. So right now we're seeing around 13.3 gigs of video RAM being used for the image editing capabilities, and that is definitely right in line with what is mentioned as usage in the model card, and that was 20.58 seconds. I saw it jump up to around 14.5 at the max. From first glance right here, this actually looks pretty good. It did a nice job of changing the paint color. I don't see anything wildly out of whack here. It kept the emblem of the car right where it was, which would have been something that could have easily just been kind of glossed over. Get it? Because it's glossy paint? No. It did deform my face, which I'm not a huge fan of, and there does seem to be some oddness there. However, it did do a nice job in actually making the car blue, to the point where you can even see the spoiler. The little bit that was visible in the back here is also made blue. So, and that's cool, and I just find the unified image editing and generation capabilities to be very neat, as that seems to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, not necessarily something that up until very recently has been seen in some of these models. So that is cool to have. Let's go ahead now, and we'll keep the same source image. Let's change my outfit. So I'm just asking it to change my outfit to a pinstripe suit. I often like to change my outfits in these to something more fancy than what I happen to be wearing in the source image. That's not bad. Okay, it seems to have thinned me out a little, which I'm not opposed to at all. But again, the face is still rather troubled, but overall the outfit has been properly changed to a pinstripe suit, and you can see that the actual fabric is bent in the way that it would be if one were posing for this photo in real life, more or less. And as we zoom in, things begin to get a bit more wonky, but it did do a decent job, especially when considering the speed in which it happened, in actually changing the outfit here. So I'm cool with that. I want to give it this render of a thing I made a while back and ask it to create a hand-drawn, basically like a design sketch of this render. This should be pretty interesting as a test, as this is something I've reserved for larger models. Now this is actually quite all right, and something I want to make note of here is that it did actually keep the plane from the Fusion. This is just a screenshot from Fusion 360, so we can see that the plane and all its markings has been kept in this design sketch, and it did a really nice job, I think, actually capturing all the faces, and this is actually better than I'd expected to receive as a result for this. So I'm quite pleased with this, to the point where I'd like to try this again with a different photo. So here's another little Fusion 360 screenshot of a little desktop chatbot, and I've given it the exact same prompt to create a design reference sketch in hand-drawn style. Again, that's actually, that's really not bad, especially the way it did the face here. I think it did a better job capturing the face than in reality how the face is actually reflected in this screenshot. So it almost went above and beyond in the detail here. I'm quite pleased with some of the, I guess, sketch aesthetic that this is capable of doing. I would like to explore this a bit more. All right, this is, let me minimize this. This is where it gets interesting. I'm giving it a screenshot of my YouTube channel, and we'll see what it does with the hand-drawn sketch. That's not bad. That's really not bad. I'm actually going to download this one and take a peek at it more. It did a good job keeping most of the text in the thumbnails here, as well as my name. And I do like the way that it has, quote unquote, sketched these out. Obviously, this just looks like someone applied a specific Photoshop filter to this, but keep in mind that is not at all the case here. Now, I will say that the face on the robot has become a bit more, but other than that, It did a good job here. This is one that has tripped up pretty much every model except very high-end state-of-the-art models. So I've given it a photo of this car and said change the brake calipers to be yellow. Most models just kind of hallucinate where the calipers are. Okay, and now that's one, disgusting, but two, this is somewhat interesting because sometimes I see, okay, the models will hallucinate calipers both in the backside here and in the front, which this unfortunately did do. However, I find it actually interesting that it changed the color of the wheels as well, even though I did not at all want it to do that. Change the brake. Okay, actually, let's do change the rims to match the color of the car. Okay, not quite, but it, you know, it got the blue hue and it did an acceptable job. No, not really, but I think for the final editing test I want to try here, I've given it just my YouTube profile picture and said create the full uncropped image from this reference photo. This is something I may definitely regret having asked it to do, but it'll be interesting to see how well it can. Oh, okay, so instead of doing a full body shot, which I had expected, it just basically filled in the white space here around the circle, and I'll say it did an acceptable job of it, especially with how it kept the framing of the poster behind me. I'm actually more impressed with that than I'd expected to be. I guess it would be logical if it understands, okay, this is a painting in a frame, but still, that wasn't bad at all. And the Mac was kept properly as well, as you can see, and so was the sweater. Overall, not bad. So let's try some infographics or like digital graphics. So you can see the prompt is now again in the top right corner, and this will be interesting because there's a lot of text that is required for this. Okay, and sadly, text definitely from at least the testing we're doing here seems to be somewhat of a weak point for this model. So I don't necessarily know, but it seems to do a decent job in things that don't require text. Extremely buff grandma. I don't know. We'll just see what happens. I spelled extremely wrong, but that's okay. Oh. Maybe it doesn't know what buff means. Okay. This is getting into more like the type of people who use Comfy UI. Oh wow. Yep, okay, so it just didn't know what the word buff meant. But then it it went ahead and created what we had asked. Now, I do want to make specific mention that something I did just go back and look for is the sample prompt that they give us in the Hugging Face model card is a simple one-sentence thing. So I do feel a little better about just doing some rapid-fire one-sentence testing here. I'm just going to steal that sample prompt where it was a cat holding a sign that says "Hello World." We're just going to try that with the extremely buff grandma. Okay, that's not bad. There are not two L's in world, but other than that, I'd say that's acceptable. Now let's get away from this, maybe. Extremely muscular, something that would not have muscles. Laptop. Let's just see what happens if we try to generate things that are not possible. Oh. Yeah, I guess that would be the logical direction that a model would take when given this prompt. Not what I had intended, but haul it. Okay. A beautiful Toshiba Quasmio laptop. And again, this is something that if it's not like necessarily in the data, it's not going to show it in verbose, but it should understand this is a, no, never mind. Ugh, that's just awful. That is not beautiful. Okay. Apache 2.0 license rug pull. Interesting. That's actually a decent looking rug. All right, the last thing I'm going to try is just a dinner party held in a hot air balloon. I don't know, it just came to mind and I figure it may produce something kind of cool. That actually looked pretty fun. I don't know like the logistics of setting up something like this, but it actually looks quite pleasant. So that is neat. And that is probably going to conclude our first look and testing of the FLUX.2 Klein model, the 4 billion parameter variant I should make specific note of, being that this is the only one released in the Klein family that is Apache 2.0. I think overall takeaway from this, and something that I did see when looking back at the Hugging Face model card here, is they even do mention right here that it may have specific issues with like outputting text or rendered text. As we did see, it definitely had more of a strength in images that did not need text in them. I think, interestingly enough, the retro LAN party photo that it created was one of the better ones I've seen in all of my testing of image models, especially being that the monitors here had some level of coherence in terms of the game being played was actually on multiple monitors, and just even showing something that is actually able to be made out. It almost looks like a soccer game or something like that, but I would say that is more impressive here because I've not really seen this level of detail in terms of an actual game on the monitor when doing this specific prompt with much larger models. So it's definitely more impressive when you don't put text in the mix. And again, this is just kind of testing it simply with some more intricate prompts, but a lot of very simple ones, which is kind of reinforced by their sample one right here was just a simple one sentence prompt. So I was happy to see that. It made me feel better about doing some rapid fire testing. Now, interestingly, the image editing capability being unified in this model is something that I love seeing, and I have been seeing more and more, at least in terms of the GLM image model that just came out a few days ago, that also had that same capability where the model could do both, and that's very fun. It did alright in some of the generations we did, most notably the hand-drawn sketches from renders or anything like that were significantly better than I'd anticipated they would be, and I was quite pleased with what we saw there. It also was able to like change my outfit, change the color of a car, and some other simple things like that. Now, really the main draw of this model is probably going to be 1, the speed, and 2, the relatively low requirement to run in terms of system specs. So they say 13 gigs of VRAM, and I think we saw at the highest, except when I had messed up, I don't know if it'll be in the video, but I'd given it a photo that was like 3000 by 4000 pixels, which then jumped up to like 23 gigs of VRAM utilization, but I think I saw 14.5 as the highest in just our general testing, and the speed as well is something that is very much a draw for this. So overall, that's going to conclude our first look and test of this model. I'm very happy to see that they have released something that is Apache 2.0, even if its larger sibling is not. It's just good to have something that we can actually freely test and play with and do whatever we would like to. And in addition to that, they did also release the base variant of this 4 billion parameter model and the 9 billion parameter Klein model as well, which we did not cover. So those may be of interest to folks watching this who have specific use cases for image models like this. So that is going to conclude our first look and testing of FLUX.2 Klein 4B. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments, and thanks for watching.